Alright, so we're going to do the Tosfos HaKovesh. So I'm going to read today, I think, just because I want to make sure we get through all the facts. And we'll see if we can set up the problems. Okay, so the Gemara starts, right? So yesterday we ended off with Rav Ashi's Kasha on Abaye. So now the Gemara is going to go through its fourth attempt at trying to learn the Mishnah. And this time the way it's going to do it is it's going to suggest that the Machlokas Tanoim in our Mishnah is itself based on a different Machlokas Tanoim elsewhere. So what we're going to analyze now is that other Machlokas. So you look in the Gemara, it's about 7 or 8 lines from the bottom. El Amar Rav Ashi, Beplugda Tahani Tanai. So their argument is this other thing which was taught, Ditznan. So we have a Mishnah. Hakovesh Shlosha Kvashin B'chavis Echas. Okay, so you pickle 3 pickled items in one barrel. Okay, now there's one piece of background information you have to know about this idea. In halacha, so whenever it comes to Isser V'Heter by foods, so there's 2 relevant categories which can be in play. One is mamashus, right, and then that gets into whole issues of bittul and all things like that, because you actually have the davar Isser present, okay, or you could have tam. Now, tam only ever is a factor when you have blia. Blia means there's an absorption of tam. Now, there are halachic methods for how blia works. So, for example, the classic method of blia is bishul, right? So, if you have heat can act as a method of causing blias, and then you can have a transference of tam in either direction, from the davar asur or from the davar mutar. It doesn't matter, but you can have a transference of tam. Okay. Another mechanism for transference of tam is pickling, right? So pickling is essentially a process of putting multiple items together in some sort of a brine or a pickling substance, okay? And through that process, it's sort of like an analog to the cooking process. It's not cooking, there's no heat involved, but the halacha views pickling as having the same property of nesinas tam that bishul does. All right, that's just the background information you know. Right? Straightforward?
Yeah.
Okay. So now what's this case? So you have 3 things that you're pickling in one container. All right. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Ochlin al Harishon. Okay, so the case is, we'll read Rashi. So Rashi says, Hakovesh kvashim, shlosha mina yerek, you have 3 different kinds of vegetables, b'chavis achas, in one barrel, shel chometz, of vinegar, o shel tzir, of brine, kedeli hiskaim, in order that it should be preserved. That's why you pickle things. So the question now is, what's the halacha if various of these minim become chayev in bior? The zman kalu hits for various minim. So Rabbi Eliezer Omer Ochlan al Rishon. So Rabbi Eliezer holds, as soon as the first min, whichever min it happens to be, as soon as the first min hits the zman of kalu, so then at that point in time, the chi of bior doesn't just apply to that min, it applies to all 3 minim in the chavis. Right? So Rashi, al harishon, al smach harishon, hamemaher lihiyos kala l'chaya min hasadeh. So we rely on the first one, which literally quickens, but the first one to become kala from the wild animals in the field. Demash mashiyakala echad mehem. So he's teaching us that if one of them becomes kalu, okay, min hasada shloshtan asur, and all 3 of them become asur. Dikavshahu mishave luhu kachad, because the pickling process basically equates them as if they're one entity. Okay, so on a basic level, if you wanted to understand the argument that Rabbi Eliezer is giving, his argument would be, because you have nesinas tam through the process of kavisha, as soon as one of them becomes chayev biur, all 3 of them are chayev biur. Right? Straightforward. Okay. Rabbi Yeshua Omer af al ha'acharon. So Rabbi Yeshua says that it goes by the last one. I'll just catch you up really quickly. Okay, so the Gemara is now going through its 4th attempt at understanding the Mishnah.
Which page are we on?
Nun Beis Amud Aleph, towards the bottom. So the Gemara is now going through its 4th attempt of understanding the Mishnah, and Rav Ashi holds the way to understand the Mishnah is by aligning our machlokas in the Mishnah with another machlokas Tanaim. So he quotes this other Mishnah, which brings down to three-way machlokas. And the case is you have three items, three different kinds of food, three vegetables, let's say, and you're pickling them together. Okay? And the halacha by pickling, the fact you need to know is that one of the ways you can have nesinas tam, or you can have a transference of tam, is bishul, which you're, I'm sure, familiar with. And another way is through pickling. Right? That in halacha has the status of achieving the same nesinas tam, let's say, that you can do through cooking. So the question now is, what happens if one of the minim in that pickled group becomes kalu? Right? So what's the halacha? So the first shita is Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer holds that as soon as the first min becomes kalu, all three minim become chayav and beer. Okay? Which makes sense intuitively, we were just saying, because if you have nesinas tam, so then the whole thing is viewed as one tarov, as one entity, and the whole thing is chayav beer. Okay. Now we're up to the second sheet. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, af al ha'acharon. So Rashi, al smach min hakala ha'acharon. So he says we rely, or we go after the last one to become kalu. V'ochel mishlashtan, and you can eat all three of them. That's what's so amazing about the sheet. You can eat all three minim. V'af al pi shemin hashnayim kala l'chaya kvar. Even though, let's say you're waiting for the last one to become chayav kalu, right? Which means at this point in time you have two minim, A and B, which are kalu, and C, which is not yet kalu. According to Rabbi Yeshua, you can eat all three, even A and B, which as independent minim are themselves already kalu. Okay, he says until the last one is kalu, you can eat all three, not just the third one. Okay, the rest of Rashi we're going to hold off on now, because the rest of that Rashi is showing you how, according to Rav Ashi, the machlokas Tanaim in our Mishnah lines up with the machlokas in this Mishnah. For our purposes right now, we're just going to analyze the machlokas in this other Mishnah, and then when we're done with that, we'll loop it back to our sugya. So we'll come back to that issue. Okay, so for the time being, we have Rabbi Eliezer, who holds it goes by the first min, that once A is kalu, A, B, and C are all chayav and beer. And we have Rabbi Yeshua, who holds that until C is chayav and beer, A, B, and C are all mutter. Okay? How is a great question, but that's what he holds. And then the last shita is Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel Omer, kol shekala mino min hasada yivaer. Mino min achavis. So he says, as each min becomes kalu from the field, so then that min in the chavis is chayav beer, but the other is not. So he would hold when A becomes chayav beer, so A is chayav beer, and you can't eat it anymore. But B and C you could still eat. And then when B goes, so now you can't eat B either, but you could still eat C. So each min, and same thing with C, right? So each min, even though they're in this chavis together, each min is considered on its own, despite the fact that there's this pickling process going on. Okay? So that's the machlokas. On a simple level, that's the Mishnah. Right? So everyone got the facts?
Yep.
It's clear? Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. So now, before we even do Tosfos, who's going to really open up the sugya a little bit and help us understand a little bit about what the Tanaim are themselves arguing about, what do you guys say about the machlokas itself? Which side makes the most sense to you? Why or why not?
The side that were you gonna say something?
No.
Okay, so let's do Tosfos, and we'll. We don't have that much time, so basically, let's go through Tosfos, set up the questions,
That's so cool.
and then for I guess because you guys are gonna have extra time today because we did share early, so today and tomorrow you guys can think about, what approaches make the most sense to you. Okay, fine. So let's just go through Tosfos here. So he says like this: Hakovesh shlosha kvashim. So you pickle three things. So he says, Kigon, lefes, ubetzal, v'kiflot, right? So he just gives three examples. She'ein biur and shave, right? Because it's important that they have different dates in which they become kalu, right? So he says that you have a leek, an onion, and a carrot, all right? And each one of these things becomes kalu on a different date, but it doesn't matter what the specifics are. You have A, B, and C. Okay. So Rabbi Eliezer Omer ochlin ala rishon. So he holds that you go by the first, right? As soon as the first one is kalu. So why? Shetamu aser kulam, because its tam makes all of them aser, right? Like we said.
Yeah, that's what David said.
Right, that's what David said, right? Reasonable argument. Velo chashiv k'mevuar. Now this is a key thing Tosfos is now going to introduce us to. He says, and it is not considered destroyed. What's the it? What's the pronoun? The tam. Okay, so according to Rabbi Eliezer, the tam of A, when A becomes chayav in biur, is not mevuar. Okay, mevuar is the same word as biur. So he says he holds the tam is not destroyed.
What does he mean by not destroyed?
Good question. Excellent question. What does that mean? Let's keep that question in mind. Okay?
Okay.
That's going to be a key question in this Tosos. But he holds that Rabbi Eliezer is answering all of them because the tam of A will be in all of them because of Kvisha. And he holds the tam is not chashiv k'mevuar. Okay? Achla Rabbi Yeshua tema, but to Rabbi Yeshua this is an astonishment. I'm sorry, Achla Rabbi Yeshua, except to Rabbi Yeshua. So tema l'ri. Okay? So the Ri is astonished by this. Okay? Or I'm sorry, he's astonished by Rabbi Yeshua, because Rabbi Yeshua disagrees, right? He holds what? Rabbi Yeshua holds, it goes by the third.
Yeah.
So what's the Ri's problem? He says, Eich mutter guf osam shekalu. He wants to know, according to Rabbi Yeshua, there's a funny thing. Not only can you eat well, not only. Obviously, you could eat the last one until it's chayav beer. But Rabbi Yeshua holds you could even eat A and B, which as their own minim, are chayav beer. So the Ri wants to know, how could it possibly be that the guf, meaning the actual min itself of A and B, are mutter to eat? They are chayav kalo at this point. But Rabbi Yeshua holds, until the last one goes, you could eat all of them. So the Ri doesn't understand how that could be. V'romer Rabbeinu Tam de B'Toras Kahanim. So Rabbeinu Tam takes up this issue in Toras Kahanim. The Parshas Bahar Sinai. So he says there's a machlokas in the Parshas Bahar Sinai. It's Bahar. So pligi b'kroi. Right. So there's a machlokas tanoim about how to read the pasuk. And for our purposes, we're not going to be so worried about the drasha. We just want to see what they're getting out of the drasha. How they get it from the drasha, we're not going to take up. Okay. But let's just read it through. He says there's a machlokas how to read the pasuk. So the Tanya. So they taught min hasada tochlu es tevu asa. The pasuk says, "From the field you can eat of its produce." So then, this is their drasha: Kol's man, sha'ata ochel min hasada, ata ochel min habayis. Okay, so that all the time which you could eat it in the field, you could eat it in your home as well, right? Which is the halacha of biur. The biur doesn't kick in until it's gone from the field. Okay, so mikan amru chachamim hakovish shlosha kvashim b'chavis. If you pickled 3 things in a barrel, Rabbi Eliezer Omer. Once one of them is kalu from the sada, you have to do beer on all of them in the bias. And that's what he holds. He holds we go by the first one. And that's what he teaches. And if you were to say to Rabbi Eliezer, lishto kramine, that the pasuk should have stopped there, dinafkalon mivilhamtecha. Right? So what's it teaching you and from your animals? Meaning the pasuk's not adding anything. So if you were to ask that question on Rabbi Eliezer, so this is what he would respond. V'yesh lomer d'sava Rabbi Eliezer di'ilav haikra, because if you didn't have this extra word of v'liv hamtecha, havamina de'oso hamin dafka yevar v'lo yoser. You would have a havamina that in this case, where the first min becomes kalu, but the other 2 are not yet kalu, that you would only have to do biur to it and not to any of the others. Afal pi shitama iser me'urav behen. Even though the iser, the tam iser of A is mixed up in B and C, you would have a havamina, says Rabbi Eliezer, that even though that's true that the tam of A is mixed up in B and C, nevertheless that you could still eat B and C. Okay. Delo dami iser de biur l'shari surim. Now, why would you think this? He says because the isur of biur is not like other isurim. It doesn't have the identical profile. How? Dashari le'aniyim. Okay, because it happens to be that things which are chayav in biur are mutter for aniyim to eat, right? Which, for instance, is not the case by pig, right? You don't say if you're an ani, you could eat pig. But when it comes to the chayav biur, even though you have a chayav to be mavayar these foods once the zman kalu hits, because you're not an ani could eat it. So you might now say, you might now have the following havamina, says Rabbi Eliezer. You might say, since the isser biur is not like a normal isser, I would think that the tam isser of A does not aser B and C, which are not yet kalu.
The tam
doesn't. You would think it doesn't aser it.
Uh-huh.
Why would you think that? Because you see, it's not a normal isser, because it's mutter to aniyim. Mm-hmm. Okay. V'havamina denachshaveh k'mevur. And why would you think that? Now this is the key point. Why would you think that the tam iser of A is not oser B and C? Because you would think that denachshaveh k'mevur. Because you would think we consider that tam as if it is mevuar, as if it is destroyed. Okay? Kevan she'ein kan ela hatam, since it's only tam. Period. Kamashmalan, the pasuk teaches you, according to Rabbi Eliezer, the word of v'liv hemtacha, which teaches you that this whole havamina is not the case. So let's review the havamina. Again, I'm not interested right now how he learns this out from v'liv hemtacha. I just want to know what it is that he's learning out. He's holding like this. You would have a havamina that the tam of A doesn't aser B and C because it's not a normal iser. But what would be the mechanism via which it would not aser? It would be that you would look at this tam as if it was mevayer. You would think to view it, since it's just tam, whatever that means, we have to explain. But since it's just tam, right? That's what he says. That it's what?
So we would think tam is included in B.
Kevan she'ein kan ela hatam. Since you only have tam here, you would think to view the tam as if it's mevuar.
This is part of beer.
As if it's destroyed, whatever that means.
Oh.
Okay? You would think to view it that way, because it's not shaveh, it's not equal to other isurim, as exemplified by the fact that the ani can eat it. Kamash malan, this whole havamina is wrong according to him. The pasuk does say v'liv hemtacha, and therefore you should not view the tam as mavuar. Okay? So according to Rabbi Eliezer, tam is not mavuar. That's the key point. Okay? He says you would have a havamina that it would be. Kamash malan, it's not. Okay, now let's read the next shita. Rabbi Yeshua savar devadai hatam chashav k'mevuar. But Rabbi Yeshua holds that tam is definitely considered mevuar. Okay, so the opposite. He disagrees with Rabbi Eliezer. V'hai kra asi. So now, what does he do with this extra word in the pasuk? How does he interpret v'liv hemtacha? If he holds that it doesn't teach you that tam is not mevuar, because he holds tam is mevuar, so what does v'liv hemtacha teach him? So he says, Lahatir av guf oso shekala. It teaches you that even the guf itself, which is kalu, is in fact mutter. Ho'ul me'urav behenatam hamutarin. Okay, since they have in them mixed in the tam of the mutter ones, right? Because what's Rabbi Yeshua shita? Rabbi Yeshua holds until the last one becomes chayiv biur, all three are mutter. Even the substance of the min of A and B is mutter. So according to Rabbi Yeshua, he says the chiddush of v'liv hemtacha is not only, since he holds that tam is mevuar, he holds the chiddush of v'liv hemtacha is that the tam heter of min C, which is in A and B, is enough to matir the guf of A and B itself, which allows you, that's his shita. You can eat A and B, according to Rabbi Yeshua, until C becomes mevayer. So he holds the chiddush of v'liv hemtacha is that idea, that the tam mutter of C is enough to be matir the actual mamashus of A and B, the actual substance of A and B. Okay, so we have a basic machlokas. Is tam mavur or not? Rabbi Eliezer holds it is not, and Rabbi Yeshua holds it is. And Rabbi Yeshua also holds, in addition to the fact that tam is mavur, that the tam heter of C is enough to matir the actual mamashus of A and B. So far, so good?
Yeah.
Okay, now what's the last shita here? 1 second. I'll just finish reading Rabbi Yeshua. So he holds, 1 second. Rabbi Yeshua savar devadai tam chashiv k'mavur. Definitely tam is considered mavur. V'hai kra, and this pasuk asi brings lahatir af guf oso shekala. It even matirs the guf itself, which was kala. Hol mu'ur ben tam mutarin, since it has mixed up in it the tam which is mutar. Umin hasada, and what does min hasada teach you? Mashmele min davar shemiktas tam mimenu basada, that a thing which some of its tam is from the sada tochlu, you could eat it. Right, so that's another part of the drasha for him, of how he knows that the tam of the mutter is enough to matter even the substance of the mamashas, which is aser. Okay, again, I'm not interested in the drashas right now. So afa iser imo, even the iser itself is considered mutter because of that. Okay, fine. Now the last sheet of Rama Gamliel savar mamashus shel kol echad shekala min asada aser. The substance of each one of them, which is kala from the sada, is aser. Aval hatam, but the tam who kimavur. So he agrees. Rabbi Gamliel agrees with Rabbi Yehoshua that the tam is mavuar. right? Meaning, so when A becomes Asr, because it's Kalu, its Tam, which is going to be in B and C, is considered Mavuar. So therefore he doesn't care about it. Okay? That's it. That's all Tosfos that we need. Okay? So we have one issue, essentially, that Tosfos has introduced us to, which is this question. There's really two issues. The main issue is Tam Mavuar or not?
And what is Mavuar?
And what is Mavuar? Okay? According to Rabbi Eliezer, Tam is not Mavuar. According to Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Gamliel, it is Mavuar. And in addition to holding that Tam is Mavuar, Rabbi Yeshua also holds that the Tam Heter of the final min is enough to matir even the substances of A and B, which are themselves kalu. Okay? So that's the difference between him and Rabbi Gamliel. Right? Rabbi Gamliel would never say that. So that's Tosfos.
Those are two problems with Tosfos.
Those are the two those are the two questions with Tosfos that we need to understand exactly. So now the question is, let's take what we've now learned from Tosfos and let's go back to the original questions that we asked before we looked at Tosfos on the mission to see which of the shitos makes the most sense. So now, knowing what you now know from Tosfos, would you revise your opinions from before? Would you back it up even stronger? What do you think?